All right, guys, welcome to Ask Truth Apologetics. This is going to be a fun discussion with my new friend, Mark Reid here. He is from Down Under. I'm using a terrible accent, of course. He's got Steve Irwin, who, God rest his soul. But he's also got Crocodile Dundee. And every time I think of Australia, I don't know if you've seen it, Mark, or not, the line where he says, "That's not a knife. This is a knife."
Yeah, I've seen it
Yeah, so I
a
don't
few
know.
times now. Yeah,
Anytime somebody tries to show something like impressive, I always just think of that line because I'm like, well, you got this impressive thing. Well, check out this impressive thing.
I
Um,
like the Simpsons version more. That's not a spoon. This is a spoon.
oh, really? You know what's funny? I've not seen
Yes.
that episode. So
Beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that was a good episode. Yeah, Simpsons.
hmm
Fantastic.
And they're prophetic apparently as well, according
Yeah.
to
So good.
according to some people predicting Trump being president or whatever. Um, so Mark and I kind of were watching a video. Was it Ahmed Nadir, right, versus Apostate Prophet, I
Yeah, I
believe?
believe so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Was it? But the conversation was about something not even related to the debate, as I recall.
right.
Wasn't it a on old biblical law? Wasn't it slavery was the topic? And I said that the law hadn't changed, and
Yep.
that's where the disagreement
Okay. Yeah,
originated.
I couldn't remember exactly how it got started. But yeah, we ended up somehow we ended up talking about whether or not Jesus came to abolish the law, like get rid of it or fulfill it, or for us to be, supposedly keeping it going. Should Christians still be following the Old Testament law, stuff like that.
Right.
It was fairly intense at first, but we started discussing things and we decided, you know what, let's just talk about this. Let's have
Yeah, sure.
a discussion and kind of just take it kind of from there, and so we can have this nice healthy um, kind of
Yeah,
debate,
absolutely.
morally
I mean, you
discussion.
were
So
very confident, and I wanted to know. It was an interesting conversation.
hmm
That's what I remember about it.
yeah.
Very, very fascinating, and I wanted to know where you were coming from,
hmm
um, kind of thing, and how that conflicted with what I had read as an outsider.
hmm
Obviously, I'm an atheist, so I'm an
yeah.
outsider to Christianity. But theology really fascinates me, and I wanted to know why, why you were saying that it hasn't changed when I see from outside it has, and that's the nut of the disagreement here.
All right, sweet. So, what we're planning on doing, guys, this is not a debate with like I have with my Muslim friends where we time certain things, and because unfortunately, with a lot of debates with our Muslim friends, we end up yelling and whatnot at each other. So, I think Mark and I are going to just be able to have a pretty open discussion with this. What we decided we were going to do was give ourselves just kind of an opening type of statement, and really what it is just kind of stating our position, how we understand the passage. Um, give ourselves a 10-minute time limit. If we take 2 minutes, great. If we take 11 minutes, like, okay. But we'll just kind of give ourselves that 10-minute time limit. Mark has decided that he will go first, and so I'm happy to kind of hear him out. I'll be kind of taking notes and seeing what he has to say. I won't respond to him immediately. What I'm going to do is just kind of lay out my position, and then we'll just kind of go. Once we understand each other's position, we'll go back and forth. Sound good, brother?
Yep, fantastic.
All right. So whenever you start, I'll kind of set my timer. I know you said it's not even going to be nearly that long, but just in case.
If you want to take extra, I'm fine with that. No
Okay.
worries at all. Easy done. So I just want to first say to thank Ask and thank you all for watching. Really appreciate it. And this is my first time doing any kind of debate or discussion. So I guess YouTube debut right here. Fantastic. So today we're talking about the changes from the covenant in the Old Testament or to the New Testament and what that entails, whether it has changed, whether it still holds, and more specifically about Matthew 5:17 to 18. So I think I'll introduce myself first. I'm a atheist, a weak explicit atheist. What that means is explicit just means whether you've consciously made a decision or unconsciously. And the weak part of the atheist is that I don't believe that no God exists. I don't claim knowledge that there is no God, but I lack belief in any God that may be out there because I don't believe that any has been presented to me so far. So that's sort of my position. I'm not a hard atheist who goes, definitely doesn't exist. I don't claim to know that. Ask was actually talking about where I was raised. Now, I wasn't raised in a religious household. I think it was nominally Protestant, but definitely had no idea about religion, was not told about it in any way, shape, or form. There was other stuff that was sort of told to me that I then came to realize I didn't have a justification for belief, most specifically New Age things and astrology. My mother was really into astrology, really pushed it on us and told us it was all true and we could predict the future and stuff. Turns out does not work. Yeah, so that's sort of where I'm coming from. While I didn't have any belief in a religious system or anything like that, there were definitely things that I believed that, and I believe in things. I just don't. I haven't been presented with enough evidence to convince me that a God does exist. Now let's talk about Matthew 17 to 18, 5:17 to 18. So I want to go into the first line, and this was interesting when I've looked at this before, and I've read a few different things that are very interesting about this passage. So the first is, do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. Now that word, I'm going to butcher this, so be prepared. Kataluwa means to dissolve, overthrow, or abolish. So it's dissolve or overthrow. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Now this is the more interesting part. The Floro says, address things promised and kept as promised, or something being filled until reaching an absolutely full point. Now this is in Greek. So that one actually has two meanings. Address things promised and kept as promised, or something being fulfilled until reaching an absolutely full point. Neither of which really says that it changes to some degree. And from the context, I believe that the address things promised and kept as promised, so fulfilling a promise, like you would say in the way that if a court fulfills something, they're keeping that law. They're not violating or abolishing it. And the other part about it was that, and I'll just pull it up to make sure. I do apologise. I was going to have this up before. It also says, under the form of the law. Oh, by the way, I'm using the NIV here. I just want to make sure that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
I'm not hardcore on that.
And then number 18 goes on, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. So, and I base that on until heaven and earth disappear, which obviously has not happened. Now, usually when reading and the documents or the things that I read, apologists ask for faith that, number one, God is the main author and the deliverer is a simple messenger. Now, you may or may not, I don't want to misrepresent you, may not believe that. And two, that the reader interprets the intention behind God's message rather than the deliverer's impact. And that was a document given to me on how to interpret the Bible years and years ago. I'm not sure if that's your position, so I won't say, but that is something that I've been told. I believe as a methodology that's kind of fatally flawed, because if you're looking at an interpreted intention, it can mean almost anything rather than what the deliverer is actually saying. What I think is that says is that you sort of ignore what the person is saying and go to a message behind it, an interpretation. Now, this has caused problems because what we've got is there's so many interpretations of the Old Testament changing to New Testament. There's the Anglican and Methodist that sort of believe there's a new law being introduced. There's Calvinism that says it's reformed into a new covenant, but then they have still adhering to the Ten Commandments, but no real reason why. You've got the Catholics, especially Thomas of Aquinas. They said that the Old Testament ceased to bind, but enforcing Old Testament law, for instance, stoning somebody or enslaving somebody, was not a mortal sin, and this was under the general equity theonomy. Also, that the Council of Trent decided that the Ten Commandments were still binding. So Catholics seem to have the Old Testament is gone, except for this thing that was decided in the Council of Trent. Dispensation says that the laws still bind, but they have dispensations for a myriad of different reasons. There's the Torah observance Christians who still, they're the ones that still say Mosaic law absolutely holds, and they still say that you are punished under the Old Testament laws. There's dual covenant theology, which is one law for Jews and one law for non-Jews. And secessionism, which is, the replacement, succession from the Old Testament to the New. Now, I really am interested, and I'm sure we'll get to it, of what your position is, because, and there's probably a few that I missed, different positions on this, I would imagine. So, and I do understand why it would be very, very nice to change the covenant of the Old Testament. It's pretty grim. It's pretty horrible. I understand, and I don't want Christians to go back to the Old Testament. I'm not advocating for that in the slightest, because I don't want stonings. I don't want selling your daughters, and I don't want any of that stuff. So it's certainly not what I'm advocating. But from my perspective, the Jesus said, the law shouldn't be changed. Now, here I'll start to talk about methodology, and it's a bit of a curvy one. So methodology is a system of procedures, rules, and processes for determining the accuracy of a postulate. Now, a postulate is simply a hypothetical. It's simply a question you ask or something that you put out. And a methodology should have some way of being an effective way. So what interests me is all these different people are coming up with a different answer, and they seem to be using the same methodology, their interpretation of it. If that's the same methodology and the results produced are always different, then you've got a terrible methodology. It's not working. It's not reliable. Leaving aside robustness, which is the ability to test over and over again, the reliability just isn't there. So essentially, I'm basically asking if a person says, hey, we know whether the Old Testament has changed to the New or not, the other way around is fine as well. How do you know that's the case? There's some problems with the Bible that you don't have the originals. Nobody has the originals. They're just not found, unfortunately. I'd love for them to wash ashore, but, and I'm sure you would as well. But we don't know how different they are, so we don't know what's changed from the originals. We just have no idea. In a case like that, it is virtually impossible to tell how similar they are. Now, you can be pretty confident over the overall message, but we're talking about sort of minutiae here, and it seems to be conflicting. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to point out that. Um, so where Jesus says that heaven and earth, not one will change. Not one jot or tittle of the law will change. Then he goes on to say that divorce is only in case of marital unfaithfulness, which is different than the Old Testament. And then when an adulterous woman is brought before him, he doesn't say the law is changed because he's afraid of the Pharisees, which is strange in itself to me, because if Jesus was a sacrifice, I don't understand why he would be afraid of the sort of, telling people the truth. But I did find that interesting. And I mean that's basically all that I really had. And I guess my final question is, why should an atheist like me believe your interpretation over any of the other faiths and doctrines and subsects out there? That's really my main question, and I would love to hear from you.
Okay. You mind if I just ask for a clarifying thing on that last question?
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely,
So
yeah,
you
sure.
you said basically why should an atheist believe in basically my interpretation? Are you saying like my
Right.
Christian version of interpretation, or are you talking like all religious understandings?
Well, I mean, obviously, just I guess Christians who
Okay, from your
believe
Christian, gotcha.
in the text. I wouldn't say, hey, why shouldn't I listen to a Hindu about what's in the Bible? I
I guess
wouldn't. I
that's
would see
true.
that as,
Yeah, I
yeah,
wasn't
as
sure
as
how far
accurate.
reaching you were. Okay,
Right. Well, I mean, but that's a difficult question in itself, because I mean, in a way, you can consider Mormons Christians and other Christians do not,
right.
because technically they do believe in a risen Christ, but it's one of the two religions I can definitely make a case for that is not true, just because of the way that it originated, and
Yeah.
obviously,
What about
um,
what's your second one? Just out of curiosity.
Scientology.
Scientology. Oh,
Yeah, Scientology is the other one. Just because, again, its origins and the way at which it formed, and quite frankly, who formed it.
right.
Because L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer who wrote science fiction, and then his religion comes out, and it's basically a science fiction book. It
Right.
literally is. So that's one I could make a strong case it's
Yeah.
real. Mormonism is the other one, just because of Joseph Smith and the golden plates and all of that kind of stuff. Um,
He literally
but yeah,
pulled it out of a hat, which is funny. I always laugh
right,
about that.
exactly. Well, twice, and the second time it was a different, and he said, yeah. Anyway, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but I would only ask Christians who do believe in the truth that it either changed or it didn't. In the case of Torah observant, I would only sort of ask them why I should believe your version of events or your interpretation of events. To an outsider, it becomes very muddy
hmm
and very hard to discern, because you've got a lot of people clamoring around and saying, hey, they've got the answer and the correct interpretation, and sort of say exactly the same
Right.
thing, and their responses are all different. And so it's very confusing to the outsider to go, well, who is, is there actually somebody arbitering this thing, or is it just a free for all kind of thing? It really is and that's no one's to blame. I don't know why I should trust in anyone's sort of opinion over another.
hmm No, I think those are fantastic questions. I try to write down most of them. I could tell you have
Oh,
them written. So when I forget them, I would love you to kind of just go back and kind of re-ask some of those questions if you're
oh,
cool with that.
absolutely. If you
Okay.
need me to go over anything, just let me know. Not a problem.
Gotcha. And by the way, you went like 12 or 13 minutes, man. Good job.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing about debating. You always think you're gonna be shorter, and then like just kind of as you go through it, it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But hey, it's all
Okay.
good.
Yeah, noted. Thank you so much. I had no idea.
No, it's all good, brother. Yeah, my little alarm started going off, but I silenced it really quickly. So And great stuff, by the way. So I appreciate you having this conversation with me. So I'll just kind of go into my 10 minutes or so opening statement,
Oh, feel free.
and then
Take extra time if you want.
we'll just do the back and forth stuff. So let me
Sure.
pull up my timer here and get it started. So what I wanted to do today was actually kind of go into a parable. So understanding a little bit about what Mark was saying, I kind of see his perspective, but I'm going to use a parable, since that's kind of how Jesus taught, to portray what I believe is happening in this verse, right? From a greater understanding of the entirety of the Bible. So here's the parable. There once was a powerful king that entered into a contract with his people. He said, "If even one of you can build this 613 room tower exactly as I have laid it out, I will grant all of you access to my castle and castle grounds." There were many people who tried to build that tower, but nobody in the kingdom could build the tower. So, as a great mercy to his people, the king sent his son to act on behalf of the people and build the tower. So, the king's son built the tower, right? So that means that it was completed. So I'm going to do a couple of, I ask myself a question and I answer it myself. Now, Mark will be able to go into this where you'll be able to answer it here in a little bit. But the question is, from this story, do the people have access to the king after the son completed the tower, right? Well, the answer is yes, right? Because he completed the tower, he acted on their behalf. So is the contract or the covenant still live, or when it was fulfilled, is it over? Well, the answer is no, it's not still live. It was fulfilled, therefore it's over. So if the son simply ripped up the contract or abolished or destroyed the contract, would the people then have the ability to enter into the king's house? Well, no, actually, the answer is no. Um, the other question that I would ask is it righteous? Would it have been right for the son to tear up the the contract? Well, I don't think so, right? So if the contract is destroyed, do the people have rights to the king's house? No. So in order for the people to have legal access to the king's house, what must happen? Right? The covenant must be fulfilled. It must be honored. So the reason why I'm giving that is because to me this is basically what's going on in the verse in question, right? So if you understand that parable, why can't you understand that when Jesus said, "Do not assume that I have come to destroy the law and the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Right? So just like the king's son did not destroy the contract, neither did Jesus, right? Jesus, like the son of this parabolic king, fulfilled the contract by building the tower, by upholding the law, fulfilling the law. And then Jesus goes on to say, and I think this is where you and I have a different understanding at this time, "For I assure you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of the letter will pass from the law until." Okay, and this is a really big word here. I think this is where our interpretations get a little bit switched. Until all things have been accomplished, right? So, like in the parable, nobody could enter the king's house until the tower was built. The contract was not destroyed and it was fulfilled. Um, so that's essentially what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, I came to not destroy, rip up the law, right? The law is the law of Moses, 613 laws. I came to fulfill, right? And heaven and earth will not pass away until, right, all have been fulfilled, right? So that's really, I went pretty short with this. That's basically my position. I've got a lot more information we can go into, but I think it'll just be a better discussion moving forward. So, Mark, do you want to ask me questions? Do you want me to
Oh,
answer some of your
yeah.
questions? What do you think you would like to do?
No, I'm more than happy to have an open,
Okay.
free-flowing discussion. More than happy to. Is that an actual parable in Mark, or is
No,
that
I just made that
a
up.
just one that you've? Okay,
That's
so
just
you've
one I
just
made
made
up
an
just to kind of
analogy.
illustrate how I'm understanding it.
Oh yeah, no, analogies are really useful, and I think that's a really strong position to come from. That if you've got a contract for a tower and you send your son to build the tower, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Now, I guess where what my asking of the analogy is if the son builds the tower, obviously the people wouldn't have access to the king's land because that was the reward for them building the tower, right?
Well, the reward was if a single person in the kingdom built the tower, that would have
Right.
fulfilled the contract. And the king sent the
Okay.
son on behalf of the people. So the son acts on behalf of the people.
Right. Okay. So there's still the reward for building the tower if he sends the son and builds it on their behalf.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So he sent his son to fulfill the contract.
Hmm.
And I guess our disagreement here is that that works as far as sort of a single structure or a single event. And I acknowledge that does work in a single event, but when you're talking about the law,
Hmm.
it's always ongoing. It's not do this and you get this reward. It's an always ongoing thing. And I guess that would be my objection to that. It's more similar to, or I see it as more similar to our laws,
Right.
um, right, than a contract. But
Hmm.
obviously, you're coming from it's a contract between um, the people of Israel
Yes.
and um, and um, and God or Jesus, or I'm not sure. I'm
Hmm.
terribly sorry.
No, it's okay.
Um, right. So I can see where you're coming from with that one. I really can.
Hmm.
Uh, um, I would just sort of point again, excuse me, at the heaven and earth passing.
Hmm.
So, um, my apologies, just one second. So, I think it says heaven and earth pass away, or for I truly, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the stroke of a pen. So, from what I'm understanding, and let me steel man your position here.
Hmm.
You're saying that it's a contract. It still is there, but um, it's not enforced, or it's not. Explain that
Well,
one to me.
so other analogies I use with this are like I kind of use the building contract. You know what I'll do? I'll use the sports analogy, right? So,
Okay, sure.
um, you know, I guess the world sports football. You guys call it football. We call it soccer. But
Mm.
so with football, right? So you have whoever's a big football person these days, right? He has a contract with whatever team, right? He plays 2 years period of time, right?
Mm.
They pay him X amount of money,
Yep.
and then that contract is fulfilled, right? After the 2 years passes. Then if
Sure.
he wants to keep playing with that team or to a new team, what happens?
Mm. Well, he either resigns. Yeah, he has to resign. Yeah.
Right. So they formulate a new contract, right? Now,
Mhm.
usually speaking in the sporting world, the new contract's going to look pretty similar to the old contract, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Not
Yeah, but
necessarily.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But roughly, yes. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, that's the way that I see it. Is
Mm.
Jesus came to fulfill the old law and bring about a new covenant, right? Which he says,
Right.
by the way, in all of the Gospels as well. That's kind of the Last Supper account. I don't know if you know that
Mm.
one, or not very well, right? Where he says, "This is my blood
Not
of the
very
new
well.
covenant." Actually, I can read that for you if I can find it exactly. So 26, 26. So this is recorded in all four Gospels. So this is the institution of the
Right.
Lord's Supper.
Mm.
So what it says, this is I'm reading from Matthew. You could find it in Mark, Luke, and John. But this is what it says, Matthew 26, and I've got ESV pulled up here. 26 verse 26, right? So now as they were eating, Jesus took bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take and eat. This is my body." Um, and he took the cup, and while he had given thanks, he gave them it, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink new with you in my Father's kingdom." So how do you understand that?
So the a new covenant can be made, and as you've said, it can be like a sports contract.
Mm-hmm.
A new covenant is made, and as you said, it can be very similar and include the old laws.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that making a new covenant automatically changes the laws of the past.
I think I agree with you. I don't think it automatically changes the laws of the past. I agree.
Right. But there are a lot of people who read this and interpret it differently from what I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question would be, what methodology are you implementing, and where did this interpretation come from that you're sure you've got the correct interpretation? Now, I don't have a dog in the race, as
Yeah,
you say.
right.
I'm not sure if that's it. Yeah, I don't have any kind of incentive to favor any one type of Christian over another. I don't care.
Right.
But what fascinates me is, where did this interpretation come to you?
Mm-hmm.
And what methodology do you use to make sure that is the correct interpretation as the writer of the original would
Mm-hmm.
want you to read it?
Right. So the Bible as a whole is basically how I come to this. I know that's not probably the exact answer you're looking for, but
Right.
it's there's so many words and so many books of the Bible, and it's very challenging until someone goes through it. Sets aside their disbelief, let's say, reads it over and over again, goes through studies of it and all that kind of stuff to really see the thread being drawn from Genesis to Revelation to gather all of this information. For those who haven't necessarily done that, it becomes kind of a piecemeal thing, right? I pick this passage, and because I don't understand what happens after or fully understand what happens after, I might not know the
Right.
different parables. I might not know the prophecies that come before that say this contract is going to be fulfilled and a new one will be brought forth, which I'll show you one here in a minute. But basically, my methodology with it is read, study, pray, look at everybody else's, commentaries, hear opposing views to myself, watch debates, and come to my conclusion, I guess. And I don't want to say that I'm greater than anyone
Mm.
else. I'm not. But in Matthew 7:7, it says, ask, seek, knock, right? And the answers will be given to you. You will find, and the door will be open to you. That's actually why my channel's named Ask Truth, because it's that acronym or whatever. But I just follow through with it and trust the Holy Spirit to guide me and utilize obviously logic as much as I possibly can in interpreting
Sure.
that. So I'm not sure if that actually. Sometimes I have a tendency of kind of drifting somewhere, but I don't know if that answers your
No, no,
question. If you
that's
want some
okay. Uh,
clarification,
yeah, it is unsatisfying to me. I have a scientific background, so
yeah,
science is where. But I don't. I'm not one of those people that says science is the only way to
right,
evaluate things. I don't think that's the case. We do plenty of evaluating,
hmm
on certain stuff without it. But I guess my problem with it is that, and don't get me wrong, I think that your methodology here is just as valid as anybody else's out there
hmm
interpreting this Bible, including my own.
yeah,
Right, so I'm very aware that I've read through the Bible once. I
hmm
must admit, I certainly have not studied it to any
yeah.
great
How
degree.
did you
I
like
must.
Leviticus and Numbers? Did you have a good time with those?
Yeah. Well, Leviticus, part of Leviticus, I found it horrifying in some
Yeah.
places. Just yeah, some of the older stuff that was in there was absolutely horrifying to me. Um, Numbers, I can't even remember numbers. Is that like full of really boring stuff? Because I don't
Yeah, I
remember a
mean
lot.
it's kind of the there's Genesis, which is like fantastic literature, right? Then you get into
Right,
Exodus, which
very
is pretty
poetic, yeah.
cool. Then you have Leviticus, which is kind of the book of the law, right? There's some storytelling in there, but it's a lot of laws. Numbers is a lot of it's like a census type of thing, right? Where like you're just counting. This is the tribe. This is
Right,
blah blah blah. There are some
yeah.
interesting stories in there. So there's bits and
Oh, yeah.
pieces. Um, and then Deuteronomy
Well,
is a really cool storyline too.
I found interesting stories in there.
Hmm.
I really did. Some of them were pretty crazy, and some of them did have messages. But at the end of the day, I guess I'm just saying that I don't have a huge working knowledge.
Yeah.
Probably way less erudite than yourself about the Bible. But I think that the methodology of sort of just what I guess is the problem I have is that the interpretations are so different
Hmm.
based on the same thing because other people would probably say the same that they study, they read, they feel the Holy
Hmm.
Spirit, and they come out with a completely different answer.
Right.
So to me, that sort of it makes me wonder how reliable that method is.
Right. And
And
I think yeah.
I'm not sort of saying, hey, I've got a better method.
Hmm.
I absolutely don't. Like I
Well,
absolutely don't.
I would actually say you probably do have a good method, right? Because as an outsider, you're emotionally detached from it to a certain degree,
Oh,
right? Whereas
absolutely.
if I am a Christian, I grew up in a Christian household. I certain heroes, family members of mine had a Calvinistic perspective, Orthodox,
Right.
Catholic, whatever. There's that emotional baggage that we have to work through. So
Mm.
I think you do have a fairly good perspective. Maybe the in depth research of it might not be there, but the objective
Yeah.
outsider perspective, I think that's where we can kind of agree. I think the methodology um, that we use, you said that it seems like we use the same methodology, but we get different outcomes. I don't.
Right.
I think that's what you said. Which obviously you said it's a systematic way of processing, information to come to a conclusion. Um, I would disagree that we use the same methodology. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I
So,
think we come to different conclusions because the methodology is different, and it might not be applied consistently. Is what I would say.
okay. So, how would other Christians say, for instance, somebody that doesn't believe, like, just say a Torah
Hmm.
observant Christian, how would their methodology differ from yours?
Well, I think in order for a Torah observant Christian to be able to defend their position is how I'm going to kind of put it, because I think you need to be able to
Sure.
defend your position. If you can't defend your
Yeah, of
position,
course.
then you probably either need to learn more about it or take a different position. Um, there's challenging passages for a Torah observant Christian. Now, I will say, I will preface this: there's nothing wrong, there's nothing sinful about following and upholding the old law. It's just not required. Um, and because Jesus himself makes mention, that he's the Lord of the Sabbath, right? So do we have to observe the Sabbath? He makes mention that it's not what enters into your mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of your mouth that defiles a person, right? So it's not the food you eat doesn't defile you, whether it's pork or whatever.
Right.
It's what we
Yep.
say, right? So there are a certain amount of very specific things, especially when it comes to sacrifice and whatnot, right? Like Jesus fulfilled the
Mm.
need for sacrifice, so there's no need to sacrifice, spotless lambs or anything like that. Um, so there are certain ways to say that I have to fully observe that. No, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think there's any way you could defend that position, at least not strongly.
So, is your position more a successionist, that it's a brand new covenant and the old one has been fulfilled and ended? Or is it more a dispensationalist? I'm trying to sort of understand where you're coming from.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily put myself in a word category necessarily, but
Yeah, of course.
what
Sorry.
I
Yeah.
no, it's fine. What I would say is uh, whatever is it's kind of like the sport contract, I guess, is where I'm at with it.
Mhm.
Is we go from old covenant, it's fulfilled, to the new covenant, right? And Jesus even says in some of his words to the Pharisees and whatnot, he says, there's basically two laws that you need to uphold. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength,
Mhm.
right? And love your neighbor as yourself. He says, on
Right.
those two laws hang the law and the prophets.
Right.
Right? So those are his two laws. Now he added a third law, which is to love people as he loved us. So those are the three explicit laws that Jesus gave to us. Now, within
Right.
that, those are very broad
Broad. Yeah.
statements, right? They're not
Sure.
613 different rules like the old covenant was,
Hmm.
right? Which a lot of the old covenant falls within that, right? But some of it
Sure.
doesn't, right? Especially when it comes to
Mm.
like the atonement system and things like that. There's no need for it.
Mm. Well, something you said just sort of triggered a memory. There was whosoever shall break one of these, in referring to the least commandments that
Mm-hmm.
shall teach men, so he shall be called least
Least
in
in
the
the kingdom.
kingdom of
Uh-huh.
heaven. So doesn't that mean that they still are binding, but the punishment is not sort of either an earthly punishment or not so strict as in
Mm-hmm.
the old covenant? But doesn't that mean they still bind?
No, that's a great question, and that was one of the questions that I had when I started coming into Christianity. So we're talking about the
Okay.
Sermon on the Mount, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus, the first chapter, right? And we're in the first chapter 5, which is the first chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, which goes 5, 6, 7. Um, he's basically saying that he's going through a lot of the 10 Commandments, and he's saying it's not what you do, it's what you think that you're going to be condemned for, right? You must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect in order to get to heaven, right?
Okay.
Um, now, this is going to be, I think this might be challenging for you to understand, but Christ came as the son in the parable that I gave you, right? To impute his righteousness, his perfection to those who believe in him.
Okay.
So he's basically telling us you can't actually be good enough to enter into the presence of God on your own. You're not capable of doing this. You need to rely on the love and mercy of God to cover for your sins, to pay for your sins, and to get you into the presence of the Father.
Yeah, no, I can't wrap my head around. I don't understand where that links to the least command, the previous commandments kind of thing. I'm
Okay.
not sure where that connection lies. I get that he says you have to be as good as possible, but um, you know, from what I got from it was that um, you can break the commandments and you're not going to be punished for it immediately, and you will still get to heaven. It's not what Thomas Aquinas would call a mortal sin,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a punishment, which is you will be known as least in heaven. It still is a punishment there,
Okay.
um, and it's not barring you from heaven. Because just say I break one of the old commandments in the Old
Mm-hmm.
Testament, that's okay. It's not going to, in the case, send me to hell,
Right.
but I will be in heaven, known as least in heaven. So I
Okay.
guess what I'm getting at is that there still is a punishment for violating that commandment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, you know,
Eternal
a
hellfire.
mortal sin. Right,
Right.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So, and that would challenge the idea that that covenant is finished and over. Because if you're a sports player, for instance, and a
Mm-hmm.
covenant's, your contract is finished and over, and the old contract has in you can't go out drinking, and you go out drinking and there's still a punishment
Right.
like that, that suggests that it's still in place or is still binding in some way.
Okay. Um, I've never thought about it the way that you're bringing it up, to be quite honest with you. I'm not really prepared to answer that particular
Oh, that's
question.
right.
I
Yeah,
thought you were looking at it from a hell or heaven perspective. But you're
No,
making
no,
it more so like
it's
levels of, blessing in heaven or something like that
yeah.
is the way that I see it. I've
And
never thought about it that way. I'm not sure off the top of my head that I would subscribe to that interpretation of it, but because I've
fair
not
enough.
thought about it, I don't want to say one way or another. So that's one of those things I'll
Mm.
have to message you when I think about it more, and get back
Yeah,
to
I'm
you.
sorry, it just popped up to
No,
my
it's a
head
great
kind
question. I
of.
mean, I love
Um,
these types of things.
and I guess that also because that statement is sort of it also brings up um, um, this was from a while ago, these questions of, okay, we are known as least in heaven. If heaven is perfection, what does it mean to be least in heaven? Is that
Hmm.
necessarily that bad? I mean,
Hmm.
you're still in a fantastic place if you're just not as privileged in that fantastic place. Is that really a punishment? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Right.
Um, yeah, but that has occurred to me before.
Hmm.
Um,
And as you're talking through it, verses are popping through my head.
Oh, please correct me if I've got
No,
something
no, you're
wrong.
fine.
Absolutely.
And literally, like, I usually don't do this live because I don't want to like say something incorrect. But, as you're speaking, what I'm thinking about is, Christ said, the kingdom is here. I came to bring the kingdom. The kingdom is here. So,
Okay.
thinking through it, that would be one level of things to consider if he's talking about on earth, right? The kingdom of heaven, Thy kingdom come. The kingdom is here. I came to bring the kingdom. Um, Again, I don't want to make a solid stance on that, but I think that's one thing that
Yeah, of
we'd
course.
have to look into a little bit as well.
Yeah, sure. Sure. No problem.
I'm trying to think. One other thing I do want to show you, right? So I showed you the new covenant, right? That Christ says, "This is my blood," right? That's shed for the
Sure.
forgiveness of sins for
Yep.
many.
Last
So
Supper.
to
Yep.
me, that's what fulfilled means. He's fulfilled that aspect of the law, right? Because with the law, and we're going to get way out into Paul and stuff, but the law brings condemnation, right? And what I mean by that is if there is no law, so to speak, right, then how can I be condemned? Does that make sense? If there's no speed limit, then how can an officer pull me over for breaking a speed limit law if there is no law? Now the law is good. A lot of people misinterpret that to say the law is no. The law is good, right? Otherwise, people just go around murdering, raping, doing terrible things without any consequence. That's not what I'm saying. But it does bring condemnation. Does that make sense? Because if I transgress against it, well, then I'm punished. You're looking at me like
So,
maybe no.
yeah, yeah. I'm just a bit lost on condemnation. So you're not talking about sort of people's condemn. You're talking about the punishment that entails breaking that law. Just is that all
Condemnation,
condemnation?
yeah. So condemnation, that's kind of a biblical word, isn't it? That would be, either you're punished on earth or you're punished in hell, type of thing.
Right. Okay. So you're talking about either physical or metaphysical punishment.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yep. Got you.
Yep.
So
Um,
how does that tie in exactly?
I'm trying
So
to think where I was going with it. So, we were talking about the law. So I was just saying the old law brings condemnation is my point. So Christ comes as a grace and as a mercy for us so that he can unyoke us, right? My burden is light, my yoke is easy, he says. And I come to me and I will give you rest. So he comes to take that burden of sin off of us, the burden of the condemnation that we have from the law, so that he can impute his perfect righteousness onto us through the blood of the covenant.
and does he do that in a physical or metaphysical sense or both?
Well, both. So he demonstrates it
Okay.
physically. Obviously by giving his life on the cross, that's a demonstration of what anyone who transgresses against God, that's the punishment that we deserve, right? If God is perfectly just, that means that every sin that happens, we ought to be punished for it, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to go here to Jeremiah 31. Oops, if I can spell it right. So I talked about coming before, or sorry, we talked about fulfilling the law. What Jesus says is the fulfillment, right, which is the blood of the covenant. And if you go back in the Old Testament, um, the all covenants with God are sealed by some sort of blood atonement, blood sacrifice, right? Whether it be a perfect, spotless ram, lamb, bull, whatever it is. Um, so Jesus coming to fulfill the old law and to bring a new law does not come without prophecy, right? So if you go to Jeremiah 31:31, it's God says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, the house of Judah, not like the old covenant I made with their fathers on the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord."
Okay.
So, are you familiar with that passage?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No,
What
not
do you
at
think
all.
about? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a yeah. I mean, I guess I may have a misunderstanding of what covenant means and what it entails, kind of
Okay.
thing. Um, I guess that, and this is Old Testament, Jeremiah, of course, it's Old Testament.
Yep.
Yeah, um, so at this point, had they broken the Old Testament covenant?
Oh yeah. They yes.
Okay.
Immediately. Yeah. I mean, anytime you sin.
Are you talking about Moses coming down and they were worshipping idols and that kind of? Oh, okay. So anytime a sin, you break covenant, basically, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
so there's 613 laws in the old covenant. And
Mm.
so if any person at all of Israel, right, breaks any of those laws, the covenant's been broken, right? They are not upholding their end of the covenant, right?
Right.
So like in a contract, if I'm contracted to, um, build something, I'm the
Mm.
builder, and you are the person I'm building something for. We have a contract. The contract is when I finish the job, you pay me, right?
Right.
If I don't finish the job, what doesn't happen? You don't pay me, right?
Yeah, you don't pay. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So it's kind of like that.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Um, any other questions you have right now, brother?
Well, just with that one, it doesn't say it's still, and I mean, I hate to be really picky, but
No,
it
please.
says that they broke covenant, but it still doesn't say that the old covenant is not binding.
Well, that's true. You're right.
It does suggest that it is implicit. I do
Right.
grant you that that is
Okay.
implicit, but I don't think it explicitly says that. And I know that's just nitpicking,
Yeah.
probably
No,
to
I get
save
it.
my own ego, but
Uh, you're right. It implies, and I would argue that
yeah,
by implication, it's a pretty strong implication. I will bring a new covenant, right?
it's a strong position,
Now
sure.
you could, I guess, you can make the argument that here's one covenant, and then I'm going to put this one on top, and they're both having to happen. Um,
Yeah,
but also when you read into the passage there, you're seeing that the old covenant, the Israelites didn't even uphold, right? So it's like this one is not working. Here's this one sort of situation. At least that's how,
okay.
and obviously I've got a confirmation bias, and you're a little more objective to it, but that's how I'm.
No, no, and that's a fair interpretation.
Mhm.
No, I think that's that's a fair interpretation. Yeah, and as I said before, I don't think anybody else has a better methodology than anyone else for interpreting this stuff.
Mhm.
I think that your interpretation is just as valid as anybody else's,
Mhm.
from my perspective. But at the same time, I don't know how you would determine that this is absolutely true because it's so vague. It's vague to me.
Okay.
To me, it's vague. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's at this time that's probably about as far as I'm going to be able to take the case.
Yeah. Sure.
So the case to me is essentially Jesus came not to abolish, destroy, rip up the contract. He came
Mm.
to fulfill. I mean, like I use a little parable, right? He came to build and impute his righteousness onto the people.
Mhm.
And when it comes to the heaven and earth thing, and I don't think we actually talked too much about that. When it comes to the heaven and earth thing, heaven and earth won't pass away until all is accomplished. I can accomplish it 2,000 years ago. Now that allows heaven and earth to pass away in the future. That doesn't mean it has to happen simultaneously. So that word until, to me, was very, very critical. And I don't think we had a whole lot of time to discuss it. And I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all things are accomplished. Meaning, like, this is going to be upheld until the contract is accomplished.
Yeah, see, I think I've got a different reading of that.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm reading it as, for I truly tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor not least stroke of the pen will any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished.
Right. So, until.
So has everything been accomplished?
Well, what is Jesus? What's the subject of this particular passage?
The law?
Correct. Did Jesus perfectly uphold the law, according to Christians?
Uh, I presume so. I'm not. Yes. Well, I
Perfect and
presume so.
sinless.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
He perfectly
Okay.
upheld the law. So
Right.
therefore it's accomplished, right? So the subject is the law, right? The goal
Mhm.
is to fulfill and accomplish the law without destroying it from the sense of, not fulfilling the contract. Um, and Jesus accomplished it.
Okay.
And so that's why we kind of fast forward to him saying, this is my blood. This is a new covenant for you, right? And it's for the
Mhm.
forgiveness of sins. So that's the fulfillment aspect that he came to do, right? That's why he and his followers, right? There's a distinction in time between after Christ fulfilled the law and before Christ fulfilled the law, right? The vast
Mhm.
majority of the Gospels are prior to Christ's atonement, right? So he's speaking to these people who must uphold the law, right?
Okay.
After that, it's a different story. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep. Okay. Sure. No, I get what you're saying. I think that a strong position, because of the way that it says that anybody that who doesn't follow the old law and doesn't teach the old law will be called least in the kingdom of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I think a strong case can be made that those laws have a different punishment, which isn't eternal damnation in the last under the last covenant,
Mm-hmm.
but they do have a punishment there, so they're still binding.
Okay, that's interesting. What would you make of? So let's assume that most of the laws are in place. Let's assume that, okay?
Sure.
But when there's an explicit law, such as the food laws that are done away with, what would you?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, because they explicitly say, hey, you're allowed to eat. Yeah, okay. So, um, I mean, talking from just unenlightened
Mm-hmm.
perspective on the Bible, I would say that always the specific overrides the general,
Okay.
and we find that in almost any legal structure on the face of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a general law for not killing people,
Yeah.
but your self-defense law would override that because it's about the specific.
Right.
So yeah, that's where you would be taking more of a dispensationalist
Okay.
stance that, hey, these laws are still binding, but there's dispensations for them
Mm-hmm.
where you can freely do,
Yeah.
such as if Jesus said, hey, you can eat whatever you want, then yes,
Mm-hmm.
that would override the general.
Right. And I would make the argument that basically the three things that we covered earlier cover most of the old covenant laws, right? So they would still be within the new contract, like loving God, loving people, and doing for others as Christ did for us, right?
Sure, but there's other stuff like the wearing of mixed thread, for
Okay.
instance.
So
You know,
Christ said explicitly, it's not
oh, I
what's
might be aware of this.
yeah. So he did not address exactly dress clothes, right? But he makes it very clear that it's not the outer appearance of a person that matters to God. It's of the heart, right? And we can talk about circumcision of the heart and how that's so important relative to the outward circumcision.
Right,
But that's a
right.
little bit of a different story. But there are several passages where
Yeah, but
Jesus.
sorry, I wouldn't call that explicit.
Okay, implicit. Then there
You
we
know,
go.
implicit,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I totally understand.
Okay.
Implicit, yes. Explicit, not so
Well,
much.
since he didn't mention threads, you're correct.
I know I'm nitpicking here, and just to be clear, I don't. I'm not a believer, so I don't see any reason to. But I can see your point that if Jesus came along and said, "Hey, you've got to treat people, with kindness and compassion, and as you love, me," and then that would override the slavery that we
Mm-hmm.
originally were having the discussion about.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that as being a strong position for saying, hey, slavery is not something that is, under the new covenant. It is, outlawed. I can see that argument.
Right. No, and I think you actually put it really well, just in terms of like the slavery thing and stuff like that. No, I think that was a very good way of putting it. I've actually never thought of it exactly in that way. So thank you for enlightening
No,
me on
okay.
that.
Oh, no worries. No, I just still man your position there. No worries.
Right, exactly. No, and I really appreciate our conversation so far, and never apologize. I'm not very sensitive, so if you just say like that's BS, I'll be like, oh, okay, well, why? You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, absolutely. Same here. I'd like to know why. And this is the thing. People might ask, why does an atheist care?
hmm
Right? Because I mean, it must have crossed your mind. Like, why would an atheist care whether the Bible says this or says that, or there is a new law or there isn't a new law? And it's more about, to me, you and why you believe what you believe,
hmm
and what motivates you to believe this. And that's what I find interesting. It's not so
yeah,
much whether um, what impact it's going to have for me, or whether it's going to affect my life. But I find the reasons why people believe what they believe be just fascinating. And
yeah.
I really enjoyed talking to you. I really did. It was a good discussion.
Yeah, and I would love to have some more discussions on this, or just
Yeah,
general
sure.
in the future. I think it's cool just to see two people who care about each other, right? At least like each other, have
Yeah, for
respectful
sure.
conversations, and iron sharpens iron, right? And so yeah, it's biblical.
Or or they both blunt. I
Or
don't.
they're both
Oh,
blunt.
right. Okay. I
Yeah,
can.
well, it's you have to do it in the right angle, right? So I think if
Yeah.
we were clashing, right, it doesn't sharpen iron. But if we're working together,
Perfect.
there we go. I'm
Mhm.
creating my own.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get to the shouting point like your Islamic interlocutors at some point. You
Yeah.
just have to try harder, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that was a really good chat. I really enjoyed it. I thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody out there for listening to me and giving me time to speak. And yeah, I'd really love to go through and get at some of the real nuts and bolts questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, was the resurrection real, and was
Right.
this kind of real? What we're having a conversation before on. I think you were using the fine tuning argument and
Mm-hmm.
things like that,
Yeah.
which, yeah, I'd really like to, talk about that. And
Okay.
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, let's. I'm fairly busy in my life, but we definitely find time to do this. So let's just keep chatting on
Yeah, sure.
Skype or whatever. And then whenever we both have time to sit down and have a discussion about something, I think that would be really really beneficial for everybody to
Yeah,
see.
that would be awesome. But yeah, I know that you've got a new family member, so that must
Hmm.
be, absolutely chaos and pandemonium everywhere. So
Yeah,
yeah, no problem at all.
mostly
Yeah, feel
poopy
free to.
diapers and throw up, but yeah. chaos and
Yeah.
pandemonium.
Isn't that chaos? And
It is, yeah, I was gonna say that's the definition of chaos. Yep, that's it.
yeah, I've just described chaos. But yeah, hit me up anytime. More than happy to come on and have a chat.
All right, buddy.
All
So
right.
thank you everybody for sitting through watching us. We got up to a total of 11 people. We're totally famous at this point. Um, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave some comments below if there's something that I said that you would like to correct. If there's something Mark said that you would like to correct, or if you have any questions for either of us. I'd be more than happy to forward some cool questions on to him, and I'd be more than happy to answer some questions for all of you guys. But Mark, I know it's like what, 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock your time, something like
Yeah,
that. Okay,
yeah, about
so
there.
bedtime, dude.
Oh no, it's only 8:10. No, it's
Oh wait,
still
that's
still
right. You're
fine.
not 14 hours. You're
Yeah,
13 hours in front. Oh, then you got
yeah,
some Netflix to do, or
yeah. Netflix
studying.
or
It
YouTube.
depends.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's only the semester's only just started, so it was just sort of a unit outline and what we're going to be studying. But
Yeah,
it's good fun.
yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me. I
All right.
really appreciate it.
Have a good day, everyone.